Hello, everyone. My name is Julianne Meyer, and I am the host of Own Your Wellness, and I am excited to be here today. I've got a special guest that loves animals as much as I do, and let's just bring her on. Her name is Jennifer Peavy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julianne. I am so excited to be here and to have a fellow animal lover in here.
It was actually just one of those things where as we were talking before privately, I was like, this is so cool. I can hardly wait to have this conversation because, just the way your brain works is fascinating. And I just, I just love to start with, tell us a little bit about who you are and your own wellness journey.
Sure. Of course, Jennifer Peavy. I come from a varied background. I started off as an engineer because that's what my father did. And my mother was a math teacher and it fit very well. And I was okay at it. I ended up getting more into innovation after that because I was trying to put together the business side and the technical side, wanting to understand what I was developing. But it wasn't until I found industrial design that I felt like I was bringing more of me to the table because I had this techie side and I did kind of understand this idea of being able to put things out there in the business, but it was about people and who would be receiving what I was doing that I really wanted to connect with. And I always thought I could bring more to the table. And so that was a lot of where my career journey was. My wellness journey really, it kind of urged me and nudged me through most of my life, but really kicked into high gear with the pandemic. I had gone into it about 3 months beforehand, and we were talking about privately about animals. I had adopted a puppy. It was the very first puppy I had adopted. I had turned 50 and I decided to have a paternity leave, and I took 50 days off. Of course, not knowing that a pandemic was coming. And just took it off between jobs, and then all of a sudden the pandemic happened. Well, that wasn't a great time to be without employment. And I did have some irons in the fire, but then I was like, what am I going to do? I had this blank sheet of paper I'd never really had before. I accepted opportunities as they came. This time I got to decide everything for myself. And so I created this structure where I spent some time thinking about it and then trying some things out and prototyping it and going back and forth and going back and forth. And I found that structure gave me a peace and joy despite being in the middle of lockdown by myself. Even though it was great to have a puppy with me, it was a lot, but I still was finding peace and joy within that space because I was spending time with myself and really trying to understand who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do.
That's a beautiful story because so many people took that time to wait, took that time to wish that things were different and, just hope that it would go back, whatever that means. Yep. Nothing has ever gone back in time. But I like that you were willing and able to sit with yourself and just be like, what do I want to create instead of what's on my plate? And, what I'm hearing you say is that you didn't make your decisions from fear or lack. You were coming from a creative place, and I adore that.
And part of it was creative, but I will admit there was a lot of fear in there that I was having to do battle with. I had always been employed in corporate America, always. And when I left, I did take a interim position in academia, applying some of the skills, but assumed I would always go back to corporate. And I'm sitting here in the pandemic thinking, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Like many people were thinking about that. But I did battle this inner voice that said, you have to. That's the only way you can do things. And in a way, fortunately, it was long enough that I had the chance to think differently and give myself the chance to think differently.
You brought up a really important point, though, is that even when you are creating, it doesn't mean that the human emotions go away.
No.
That fear it's there, but you sit with it instead of avoiding it or trying to make the journey less painful, shall we say, even though, really, it's just a matter of perception, but.
Yep. Definitely sitting with it.
Yeah, exactly. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about your relationship with your dog and how that has sort of shaped things for you.
Well, that's interesting because I actually started with those 50 days that I had with her. I would note, it was my first puppy. I'd had dogs before, but I would make notes about the things that surprised me about her. And the things I learned from her. And there were all sorts of things about, okay, so I went through training and I was doing YouTube videos. And
Mhm.
before the lockdown, I was going to training and they had the main five and had all this other stuff. She is a very smart dog. And I would assume, oh, you picked that up quickly. Let's pick this up quickly. And I would learn very soon about how she would get frustrated. And she didn't get angry, but she would just kind of stop and go, I don't understand what you want. And I realized that I was jumping 5 steps ahead because
Ah.
in my mind, I could see the 5 steps. But of course, it's
Mhm.
the first time she had ever seen them.
Mhm.
And what I realized is I needed to go back and take a smaller bite and get her to master that little bite. And then she was feeling successful. And as she was feeling successful, therefore, she was very excited to learn more and to do more. And now that I say that, that was one of my lessons is also during the lockdown that I was always trying to take on too much at once
Yep.
and that I needed to take smaller bites and celebrate those successes in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, I mean, a lot of people don't realize too that, when you, first of all, celebrate those tiny wins,
Yep.
it creates, this attraction to do more. Like you're more excited to take the next step.
Yep.
And, celebrating those small wins, I think is completely underrated at this
Yeah.
point, because there's going to be times when you don't feel like doing whatever it is you want to do.
Right.
And if you build up that framework and build those new neural pathways, then there's not so much resistance when you don't feel like doing it. So,
Absolutely. And even in my structure, I literally have a time of celebration because
oh, I
it
love
was, well, and part of it was because I don't naturally do it.
that.
I
Hmm.
finished a task, if we're going to the next one and keep going, keep pushing. And so I was like, no,
Yeah.
let's stop and acknowledge what happened.
So, what is your puppy's name?
Lucy,
Lucy. Oh, I love that.
Lucy the Black Lab.
Oh, I love that so much. And I like that you were able, because I think the animals are one of our biggest teachers.
Hmm.
And they reflect back to us things about ourselves whether we realize it or not.
I agree.
So I completely appreciate that you were willing to look and see, okay, maybe I could learn that lesson, or
Yeah,
that's something that I need to see in myself, because that's amazing. That's absolutely
it
amazing.
is. It is. And it's still to this day, she teaches me things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny too, because we think, especially for entrepreneurs, we think
Mhm.
that, first of all, it's going to take a lot longer than we expect, and it's going to cost a lot more money than we thought.
Right.
It's like, why get frustrated before the miracle? Don't give up before the miracle, as they say.
Oh, the other thing is you assume that the miracle is, due north when it actually
Uh-huh.
is northeast. And, you may need to adjust to it. And if we don't
Exactly.
pay attention to those celebrations or even what we learn from the failures, we may
Hmm.
not be able to just, adjust a little bit to the course.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's amazing. So, what else has your lab taught you, Miss Lucy?
Miss Lucy, so the recent one, and this has always been a thing with her. She is so serious about playing that she will adjust to play with anybody else. So I have
Oh,
seen her with the oldest, crotchiest dogs that just growl, and she will wear them down until they play with her.
yeah.
And part of it is, they've been abused, maybe not by people,
Mhm.
but other dogs and bullies, and they're old and they're in pain and they're scared. And she builds their trust.
Mhm.
And it's beautiful to watch. And she seems to know where the line is. And I don't know if it's intuition or empathy. She's only 2 years old, so it can't be years and years of experience, but she seems to have this sense. And just recently, we went to the dog park. We were there there at noon, so there weren't many people there. And a family finally showed up with a
Mhm.
three-legged dog.
Oh.
And I thought, this is the first time that she's going to interact with a dog that doesn't have all the same abilities of all the other dogs. And I thought, well, I trusted her. And I thought this will be interesting to see. And it was amazing. The dog got in the park, and the typical thing is they run just to see, and they're building trust, that type of thing while they're running. This dog was so fluid, and it was a back leg that was missing. So it was almost like a tricycle, was just so fluid running. But then once they built up that trust, they started wrestling, which is actually Lucy's favorite part. And it also, I think, for this dog was good. And they would just wrestle and wrestle and wrestle and do that whole teeth thing where they,
Yeah.
they had each other and all that. And I melted completely watching her do this, on knowing what was needed to also get what she wanted. She met this dog partway, and she keeps meeting all these people partway.
That is such a wonderful, not even an analogy because it's not, but for humans, there's a difference between manipulating people to get what you want and, showing up with your intentions of love and play and meeting them halfway.
And building trust. I mean,
yes,
she honestly built trust with them.
Exactly. So my question, and I don't ask this to everybody, and this is a little bit maybe off topic, but do you have like a morning routine that you do in order to set yourself up for the day?
I do actually. And it begins with, well, first Lucy, got to get her outside.
Exactly.
Part of that. But I do consider what is the first thing I put in my body. So I get a very large glass of water while she's eating. I then get a cup of tea and I take it to a place, and typically it's a chair somewhere in a corner with a light and a little bit of music. And then I go through and I check in 4 different ways. I check in spiritually, saying, acknowledging that there is something larger than me. And I check in with that. I check in, obviously, with her. That's with love from others, is just making sure that there's something going on there. I check in with myself, and I go through a journaling routine where I have 4 prompts. I check in to see what is my energy level. And I actually write down, I assign it a number anywhere from 0 to 100. And the main reason I do that is I ask myself, and it's one of these things, I actually ask myself a number and then see how I respond to it. Because it's kind of a gut feel. So there's not really an articulated number that comes with it, or not a voice that comes with it. So I kind of present a number to my gut and say, are we 80 today? And are we 75 today? And what I find is I actually look at that over time. And if I've had a certain dump or a drop or an increase, consider why is that? Because obviously if there's an increase, I want to have more of that. I then look at articulate what I'm grateful for. And then I have a statement of faith, which really starts with, what am I uncomfortable with or scared about? What is bothering me? And then I flip it around and I give myself a statement of faith. Ooh. So saying, if I am valuable, I am capable, I will handle it. I will make a statement. You will take care of this. I acknowledge that it's something I'm uncomfortable with. And then the last thing is, it's labeled as desire, but it's something that I need to nourish me for that day. So lately it has been laughter. I have been watching Designated Survivor on Netflix, and it is way too heavy.
Yes.
It is very, very heavy.
I had to set that show down.
Yeah, it's been a little too real. Especially there was one just recently that was on a pandemic, and I went, okay, it's a little too real. So I actually put on there, I need laughter. I need to find, something that I'm either going to watch something or hang out with somebody, and I need to spend some time laughing. And from there, I let my brain go wherever it needs to go. And sometimes it goes back to that statement of faith. Sometimes it's about what I'm grateful for and how excited, like Lucy with the 3-legged dog, and go for however long it needs to go. Typically it's about a page, but sometimes it spills into the second one. And then from there is checking in with my body. And it's typically either a walk, taking Lucy out, depending upon whether it's the summer and it's really hot during the day. So I go in the morning, or yoga, just checking in. What is feeling tight? What is feeling good? And then I get ready. Then the shower and whatever else.
Yes. No, something that just keeps popping in my brain from what you said is, you said nourish yourself, and you weren't referring to food. And I love that so much because, there's so, as because first of all, the beginning of the show, plus, you
Yep.
know, I was talking
Yep.
before, is like there's so much more to health and wellness than what we put in our body and how we exercise it. You know,
Yep.
it's like you've got to nourish your mind, you got to nourish your heart, you got to nourish your soul. What are you putting in?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes even when I do put on there, it's not food, but I'll say a good meal. And
Hmm.
typically that means I have taken the effort to actually pull a recipe out instead of microwave something. You know, I've
Yes.
actually cooked it and I've thought it through and I savor it while I eat it. So
You
it's
know that
almost a soul thing.
exactly. It's not just even just what you're putting in, but how you're eating it. Because I used to live in Europe, and you know, there people eat so-called bad foods all the time. I lived in Italy, so you know, all these supposedly awful foods for you, pasta, pizza, and all that. And I was the most naturally thin I'd ever been,
Yep.
eating all these supposedly bad foods.
Yep.
And there's a lot to that, but the one thing that I noticed that was different in the culture there as opposed to here is that mealtime is with people you love and you care about. Mealtime is a gathering. It's more than just shoveling food into your mouth. And
Absolutely.
you know, you saying like I pulled out a recipe, it's the exact same thing. You don't even need to be with somebody else to have that nourishment of,
Right.
okay, I'm going to love myself enough to make some food for me.
Exactly. It becomes a ritual, almost like
It
coffee
does.
in the morning or tea in the morning. It's a,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. No, I love that so much. And oh, we got an amen from Helene. I just want to pop that out there
Nice.
right now. She's such a sweetheart. Anyway, so you know, I love that you start your day like that. But are you somebody who also, because for me, I've been dealing with this idea of scheduling because, you know,
Mhm.
you mentioned that you put like celebration, or even for me, it's, I got to put play into my schedule.
Right.
So are there certain things that you think are just non-negotiable that need to be in your everyday?
And I do find that my practice is part of that. That I need to start my day that way.
Mm,
And right now, what I do is, yes, Lucy has to go outside, but I go back to my bedroom.
mm,
And in a way, I'm going back to my little cocoon and I'm
yep.
not going to leave it until I've done these things. And then I'm ready to actually go out into the world. And part of that's because I'm an introvert. And so then I do feel this cocoon or this incubator or whatever you want to call it, this
Mhm.
protection in this room, this sanctuary that I've made out of that, that says, this is my place. And now I will allow people to interact with me when I leave there. So, like, all my devices do not go into my bedroom. So nobody can text me. There's
Mhm.
no ping that makes me want to run over there and see what it is,
Yeah.
because a lot of that is just, this is a place for me, and I think that's non-negotiable.
Oh, that's beautiful too, because you know, we get as I'm a child of I'm what they call a zennial. So
Okay.
so I grew up playing outside, and when the, you know, lights went on the street, that's when you come running home. Like, you know,
Uh-huh.
I was learning computers, so I had like the pre and the now, so I can do both.
Right.
You know, I
Right.
remember dial-up phones, the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So for me, it's so funny because there's so many people that are just absolutely attached to their cell phones. And I'm like, okay, remember when you didn't have one and you couldn't be reached absolutely constantly? It's
Right.
okay.
Right.
It's
Right.
okay to not have that, you know, availability, because
Right.
it changes our brain chemistry too and our quality of life, whether we believe it or not. It's just a matter of fact. So,
Well, and that energy level, that number,
mhm,
I've done little experiments on how to change that, because typically it's based on sleep.
mhm,
Well, one of those is, can I read an ebook or do I need to read a paperback or
yes,
a paper-based book?
mhm.
And there's a 10-point difference for me. If I read from an ebook, I will not sleep as well. And I will wake up not feeling the same energy level. And so I said, okay. I even said, okay, I've got the blue light glasses. Let me try it with that. So I did it without the glasses, and then I got the blue light glasses, and then I did it with a paperback, and it made a difference.
It does make a difference, and, I still have my library card.
Yes. Fabulous.
I have, my, boyfriend and I have a wellness room, and that's where all of our books are, and we have a
Nice.
reading lounge, like, lounge chair and everything else, so we even have that space too where we can meditate and do yoga, and yeah, so I 100% appreciate the idea of, you know, not having those electronics there, and also your sanctuary, because we need a sanctuary.
Yes.
I don't care who you are. You need like a place. Like my spiritual mentors, they say like they call it a prayer closet. So there's a place where you just go and you be with yourself.
Yes.
So I love
That's
that.
great.
So we're almost going to be to commercial, but there's something that I really want to touch on briefly. And before we go, and you have a book.
Yes.
And can you show it for everyone for us, please?
I can. Here it is.
I love that. Ooh, Natural Reflectors.
Natural Reflectors.
And we're going to talk about where we can find it when we come back. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about it before we go to break.
So part of coming out of the pandemic, or within the pandemic, I created this structure and I created my own workbook. And of course, I was unemployed. And I thought, well, this might be something worth sharing. I was getting a lot of peace and joy and seeing a lot of stress around me. So I thought, okay, let's talk about it. Started talking with some friends and came across this group out of Georgetown that as an entrepreneur class, you write a book. So they figure that's part of it. There's your product. And they advised that I actually write a book and then do the workbook later. And so that's how this all came to be, was this idea of how do I combine reflection and action? And my particular twist on it was, how do I engage with nature, or how am I inspired by how nature combines rest and action or productivity? And then how do I apply that to my own structure?
That's beautiful. I love that so much. Cool. So there's the book and the workbook, or just the book for now?
Just the workbook for now. I did actually release a blank journal, a matching journal for Christmas, going with that. My goal this next year is to create the workbook, at least for me. I am going to release an audiobook in May, though. So there are some things coming, but it's one step at a time.
You know what? It's a great start. So
absolutely. I'm thrilled.
No, absolutely. And then also, before we go, I wanted to hold on one second. There we go. Your website. So let's pop that up there too, as well. As I mentioned before. And then to find your book, can you find it here as well as Amazon, or is this the best place on your website?
Well, we can't find it there, but it will take you over to Amazon.
Perfect. And then one more time, if you could, we're going to show it again, but if you could pop the book up just so that people, when they're looking through, they'll know exactly the cover that they're looking for.
Yeah. And it's not an issue. You go Natural Reflectors book, but this is a term in photography.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. So there's this idea of, when you've got the lights and you've got some sort of reflection of the light on your subject.
You do have a natural ability to cross different ideas and bring them together, don't you?
well, and when you go to Amazon, you'll see all of that in the search. And then there's me.
That's amazing. I'm just absolutely fascinated with how your brain works.
Thank you.
Absolutely fascinated. But we do need to go to commercial.
Okay.
So we'll be back in just a minute, okay?
Sounds good.
Oh, this is great. And before we go to commercial, I want to say hello to everybody who is watching us live. You are always appreciated. And we do, like I said before, commercial time. So let's do that. And we'll be right back after these messages.
Now, you can vibrationally align your aura. You can gain a larger and spiritual perspective on life, relationships, God, people, wellness, and money. You can also have moments of meditation and reflection any time of the day. And reading the thrilling, adventurous, and mystical story of Shiga will just add more faith to your daily experience of the mystery of the universe.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, my name is Julianne Meyer, and I am the host of Own Your Wellness. And today's guest is Jennifer Peavy. Let's bring her back. Hello, my new friend. By the way, Helene and I were noticing your artwork. It's very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That was actually one of my explorations during the pandemic as well, as I've always wanted to be a working artist. And so this was the idea of getting the process down. You know, sometimes artists, when they're working under a mentor, they will make 100 of something or whatever it is. And they get there. I got to 50.
No, that's absolutely amazing. You don't know this, but I actually went to art school in Italy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was fun. It was definitely a fun experience. I've kind of like done a little bit of everything, but art school was definitely my favorite thing. So
in Italy, that I can see why.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, before we go into that, I really would want to talk about your books some more. Okay. So, you know, we've talked about a little bit about the title. Can you explain, you know, what that means in photography and how you likened it to your book?
So part of it, yes, it's in photography. It wasn't necessarily part of how I got there with the book, but it was interesting how the two get together. But it's the idea of you want your subject to have light that's coming onto it. And it's whether it's artificial, how does it look? Or does it look natural as it comes into it? So is it taking natural light and reflecting it onto the subject? And so you can have different colors if it's warm or cold and that type of thing. What I was doing was looking at the idea of combining reflection and action as part of my structure. And what inspired me as I was following a couple of authors, Christina Rilo and Dr. Ezzie Spencer, who work with modern management practices and then ancient wisdom. And both of them talked about following the moon. And I was trying to look for something new. I had my engineering process, I had my innovation management process, and I had my design process, but each one of them were siloed. So really, when I had that blank sheet of paper, I was saying, what would my process be? So I wanted something different to make myself think different. And so I said, okay, well, let's look at the moon. And part of what I did is I used the moon as a timepiece. And I said, when it is darker, that is more reflection. And when it is lighter, there would be more action. And so therefore it would tell me when to do what. And I kind of just followed that for a while, maybe 2 or 3 moons. And it's somewhere in the middle there, I realized that what I was doing was actually applying the design process within there. So I was in the reflection time, dreaming about what I wanted to do. And then as the light would start coming, I would start mentally preparing for it. And then I would make prototypes, and then I would iterate on those prototypes. And then I would synthesize what I had learned to see if it met what I had dreamt. And then I would start documenting it. I actually at one point would make a presentation to the client, as we would do in our firms with our design projects. And I would present to myself and say, this is what happened. And then I would stop and critique it, which I'd never done before. I'd never given myself the advice that, I give to everybody else, and then clean up and prepare for the next moon. And the nice thing was, it's 29 days. It's a nice bite. It's long enough to get something done, but short enough that you can iterate and say, okay, I liked this. I didn't like that. And I could decide what to take into the next cycle. Moon cycles don't resonate with everybody. And so part of what happened with the book was this idea of, let's expand this more into how does one develop their own personal process, looking to nature for inspiration. And here's me as an example, not the example. And so that's part of it. The first part of it is about, how did we get here so busy? Why are we burned out? Why should we consider reflection? And then there's a section on, how do we even look at nature? Looking for patterns, looking for layers. Why should we even be inspired by it? And then finally getting into, how do we apply all of this? And it really, that last section is going back to, well, try, do what works, come back and iterate again on that. So
I love that.
So that was part of where the title came from, was saying it's being natural and nature, and we're going to reflect. So that's how that came together.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, it's the only word I can think of off the top of my head that encompasses what your explanation, because, I like that you take these, all of your background, and then also bring in what might be not considered science, necessarily.
Right.
However, I don't see how, people, the thing with the moon, let me just start with this. The thing with the moon that it took me a long time to think about is, one is, people like, oh, it's a bunch of crap and all this, but it's like, the moon can move the ocean, and we are mostly made of water.
Right.
So to think that the moon doesn't affect us is kind of silly.
Right. And quite honestly, I was just saying, okay, it's a timepiece.
Exactly.
That's all I was saying, is just connecting with the fact of when, and the fact that when I go outside, I would see the moon. It would remind me of this new habit.
Yeah.
And would make me feel connected outside of me.
Yes, exactly. That's beautiful. And one of my spiritual mentors, he's always talking about, what season are you in? Same idea.
And so 2020 was about the moon phases, which I still do. But then 2021, what I've done is say, okay, well, the light changes with the year.
Yes.
And so therefore, I actually assigned the same thing I did with the moon phases, but I assigned the entire moon with a theme. So January was about dreaming, and then February is about mentally preparing, and then the spring was about prototyping, and the summer was about refining, and then September was harvesting, and October was not refining, but documenting and saying what happened. And now we're we're going into this phase of resting. Now that it's December, and I am really excited.
A lot of people don't even appreciate the idea of resting.
No, especially in December, with the holidays.
Yeah, exactly. But it's true. There's just, there's a time for everything. And I think that you touched on it briefly, but and I'm going to put it in my own words, but we turn into human doings instead of being human beings.
Yep.
And forget that there are ebb and flow. There's ebb and flow to everything in nature. And we are a part of nature, even if we're living in our homes and driving our cars.
Yeah. I make this argument in the book about what is it that makes us continue to be busy? And part of the argument I said is that we feel like, well, we're in the Western cultures, which means we feel that time is linear.
Yeah.
And therefore, if we don't deal with it now, it's lost forever. The second thing is that we assume that we are going to lose out to something. There's always been something that we're competing with, and it used to be other people, but now it's machines.
Yes.
And so even cognitively with AI, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how they're talking about how many articles are being written by robots, and now there's designs out there. You can go to Canva and you can get all these wonderful designs and all of this done by a robot. They're good, and I'm not saying it's bad, but it leaves what are we as humans are supposed to do if we're going to
Mm-hmm.
compete against robots? And some people are still competing against them, and
Yeah.
that's there's certain things we can't win. So it goes back to what is left is what is a human can do beautifully as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to a machine do efficiently.
I was just saying this to my boyfriend the other day, and this is kind of fascinating. I was thinking that if I'd ever had kids, my grandkids would be the ones to say to me, "Oh my gosh, you actually drove a car?"
Yes, yes, yes,
How primitive.
yes, yes.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, and there's certain things that a robot should do. Why shouldn't there be efficiency? Like if I had an automated car, I would
Mhm.
be in it and then I'd wake up in Key West. There's no reason to fly. You go to sleep and you wake up where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, I really struggled with that idea a few months ago. And that, because of COVID, a
Yeah,
lot of jobs and a lot of things have been eliminated or altered because of how the world has changed. And it just made me think about, okay, well, first of all, there used to be horseshoers, for example,
right,
we don't need horseshoers. I mean, we do now, but not in the same
right,
not in the same capacity, or
right,
just even it's just how the world evolves, and it gives us an opportunity to maybe focus on something that is more important to our soul, as
right.
opposed to trying to grind, for example, just trying to
Exactly, exactly. And
yeah,
let the machines do the things that we really don't want to do anyway.
exactly. No, I love that.
Yeah.
So during your
Mhm.
reflection periods, have you discovered something that maybe you don't think you would have taken the time to notice?
So there are many things. I do think, though, this idea of when I put the design process in there, the idea of, okay, I did all of this work
Mhm.
and I'm at a point of what does it mean?
Mhm.
And did I get what I wanted out of it? Because when I
Yeah.
dreamt, I will write down what was my intention,
Ooh.
what would be good enough.
Mhm.
Because I'm really bad about that's the engineer. I'm really bad about overreaching. So what is good enough? Because I will lose that. So I'll write it down. And when I go back and evaluate and take that time to present to myself and then breathe and then become the client, that was extremely powerful
Mm.
to then say, is this what I wanted? And it's almost like going from the head to the gut.
Mhm.
Although the gut is telling me, there is articulation with it, but the gut is saying, was it good? Did I meet the intention? And I don't know how many times that particular, and it's just 3 days. I don't do it for 3 days, but it's a 3-day period where I touch on
Mhm.
these the different projects. How many times I realized, oh, I tried to add 10 too many things in there. And when I finally look back, I realized that I not only met good enough, I did it excellently. It turned
Mhm.
out a whole lot better than I expected because my intentions and my expectations generally don't match up. But I'm able to celebrate the fact that I won in a way,
Mhm.
whatever however you wanna put it. It turned out the way it should have turned out, but I get lost sometimes along the way while I'm in the doing. So
Yeah.
that's part of the cycle. It's not only reflection and action, it's the idea of going up high and looking at everything or getting down in the
Mhm.
details, and I get lost when I'm down there in the details. So it's nice to be able to come back up and take a nice look and go, "Look, it's really beautiful. You did it." And then we celebrate.
Yes, exactly. It makes me think of a few different people, but the one that I'm going to mention is my Zen life coach that I had a while back. And
Mhm.
that's a really amazing story, by the way. But anyway, something that he had us students do was it's a chair exercise where you sit on one chair and you talk to the other chair and say something that you're afraid of. And you answer and you go back and forth. It's like all of a sudden you
Yeah,
have this bird's eye view. It's
yeah.
like, oh, okay. Or like, I think it was Bob Proctor, maybe it was Jack Canfield. I think it was Bob Proctor though, but he was talking about like imagining the problem on the table and then standing up and going and looking at the problem in different places from the same table. It's like, oh, you have this whole new perspective that you just don't see when you're like focused right in there. And I know that you're not the only one. Me too. I get lost in the details.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And and I guess we should. I mean, it's really nice. Like I couldn't do the string art if I didn't get in there and get into the details of each of the little nails. But if I don't stop and look at the design, I don't know what I did. It could just be a great big hairball.
Yeah, you need both.
You need both. You need to reflect. You need to act. You need to have a plan and have a free time. And
no, and I like that idea too, that you incorporate these things as something, nothing gets lost. As in, sometimes for me, like I work on my computer a lot. I can be on there for 4 hours and not realize it's been 4 hours. Thank goodness I have a dog that needs to go out. So, but I could all of a sudden and this is the worst culprit ever. I'll be on Facebook and all of a sudden I realize I spent 30 minutes doing nothing just because I just go get so focused on something that's not even important. It's just so easy to do. It's so easy to do. So my question too for you is, what I'm hearing is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have a life where there's like a schedule and a time for things. However, there's a flow.
Right.
So how do you combine those two things? Is it just trial and error? It's more, maybe some days it's a little bit more of something as opposed to the other, or how does that work?
I think the structure is helping me focus on the flow. Because otherwise I would be lost. Like and there are two different ways I would be lost. There'd be one, I would get sucked into the details, and before you know it, it'd be 9 months later. And I may be so wrapped around those details, I may not actually get anything done because there are too many things. But because 9 months have passed and nothing got done, there's a little voice in your head that goes, you didn't get anything done. And it drags me down, and then I'm not able to continue. So the ability to have this structure and say, Jennifer, you're only going to spend 3 days on this. You're only going to spend 3 days on this prototype. This is not going to take 9 months. And if you like the prototype, I'm more than happy for you to reiterate it in the next 3 days. And if you really, really like it, we can make it a project for the next moon. And therefore, they all connect together into this system, as opposed to my getting lost with one thing for a longer period. And I can see then more that is happening. I'm able to trust not only the process, but trust myself more.
Yes.
So I really don't think the structure is supposed to support me. That's the intent. Sometimes it does. In July, when I was all in the summer and it was all activity and to-do list, I felt like I was being ruled. But the intent is for it to support me to find flow, particularly when I didn't know where it was. I knew the word. But when I began this journey, I couldn't tell you what flow was or what it meant. And that was actually part of, and I don't remember how I wrote it, but that was part of the intention of the entire thing, was to find it.
And since you said that, what is flow?
So right now, I would say my definition is where the energy is. And that's one of the things I really like is I do quantify where is my energy today. And then I can look and say, well, what influenced that? I got my COVID booster, therefore it dropped, I didn't sleep well last night, or I slept great last night. I'm able to say, what was it that helped me do that? And I can even compare to a year ago, those numbers. And be able to say, okay, that's telling me that I am more in flow because my energy is higher, and I am accomplishing more, and I am trusting myself more, and I'm not as affected. Doesn't mean bad things don't show up. And it doesn't mean that there aren't things that eat at me, but the noise is a whole lot less.
Ooh, I just got I call them God bumps instead of goosebumps. That was good. So what I'm hearing then is how you, because a lot of people don't necessarily, I mean, when you're in flow also because it just feels like a certain way.
Yeah.
So you can tell when you're out of flow when, at least for me, let's say for you. So when your energy is lower, for example, for me, and I'm just curious if this is something that's same for you, is all of a sudden everything just, I keep hitting a wall. I'm,
Yep.
what is this?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There is a wall when I probably know better when I'm out of flow
Yeah.
than when I'm in.
Yeah.
Because I can easily, like you talked about getting lost at Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in flow?
Exactly. See, there you go.
Because I can very readily get lost in a project. I can get lost in making one of these.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I would say, and I am happiest making.
Mm-hmm.
But when I walk away, how do I feel about it? Did I feel drained? Did I feel energized? Because I can get lost within what I'm doing in that moment.
That's an important distinction. That is a
Yeah.
very important distinction.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you made that because it's not the same. I can get lost in a TV show too, but that doesn't mean that that's
that I'm in flow. Yeah. Because at one time I probably would have said, "Oh, you love it so much you get lost in it. That must be flow." And I'm like, "No, I'm not sure about that."
Nah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's true too, when, it's easier to tell, at least especially in the beginning, it's like, okay, I'm not in flow. I'm okay. So what do you do to stop and recalibrate when you realize, hey, I know that you set yourself up for success in the morning with your rituals and but what happens, like, say around 1 p.m. when all of a sudden you're like, wait a second.
And this is the dog with the bone type of thing. And part of that is I'm used to that engineering. I spent 20 years as an engineer. So there is a lot of ingrained habits that say, don't you dare give up.
Exactly.
Don't walk away from that. Try one more time and you'll get it, and all of this type of stuff. There will come a point where I'll say, stop. You just have to stop. And there will be physical feelings. There's tension. There's a moment that feels lost. There's however much is not getting done, like a half hour's gone and I still only made it, half a step forward.
Yes.
And you can see that the results are not working with the effort.
Yeah.
Which has been a really great growing space for me because that engineering ingrained perfection. And I'm like, good enough. We can always go back and do another iteration. And that is still, I'm having to grow into that, is to understand we can go back.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time thing. Let's see what we learn from that. So I have to stop. Sometimes I have to go walk. Sometimes I have to go eat something because if it's really bad, it's because I'm hangry. I've needed something.
No, I think that's a really good point too. For me, it's, I just stop, put it away, go for a walk, go eat. Like you said, for me, sometimes I just need to not, I just need to be.
Yeah. And it will sometimes, okay, well, we'll just deal with it the next day. The nice thing about this structure is I'm able to give myself permission. Oh, those 3 days are up.
Yep, exactly. Time limits. Okay, where am I on this? Exactly. I love that.
Yep.
And I love the idea too of the iteration because, like you said, for me personally, I'm like, oh, it wasn't perfect the first time. No, you can improve upon. There is round 2 and 3 and 4 and getting better. I mean, think about even TV shows, for example, even their intros, they'll evolve over time. It's not,
pilots are always awful.
Exactly. That's, it's just to get going. It's to put something out there and grow upon that. So I love that. I just wanted, because we're getting towards the end of the show, but I just put your Linktree in the chat. Okay. And I also want to put it on the banner here. So explain what, for those people that don't understand what Linktree is, what can they find when they come here?
So Linktree it's a nice way to have a bunch of URLs within one place. And then this way, this can sit in social media, like with Instagram or wherever it is. And then therefore I can change things and you don't have to know about all the new URLs. So within there, you'll find all of my social media handles, links to everything. There also is the links to the Amazon sites for the book and for the journal. There's some other podcasts I've been on, and those are within there. And then there are a couple of things. I've written an article series for when I launched the book. And then there's a cornerstone article that will link you over to the Medium site. And then there's a few little things during the launch, like my epigraph was about Hope for Flowers by Trinus Paulus. And I have a little bit out of there, and I let you watch the entire video if you want to see the context of the story. And so that's what's out there right now.
Oh, I love that. That is fabulous. And of course, the Black Lab.
Yeah, and the Black Lab, yes, for Lucy.
I like that through line because it makes it easy. Your name and the Black Lab. It's easy to remember.
Well, and part of it too is Peavey with an E, the second E. Most people drop it.
Yes.
And so it's nice. These are things that people aren't going to misspell. So
yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. And then also, I just want to put up your Instagram as well. What can people find specifically on there?
So right now, I'm going through a campaign talking about the journal and the book, obviously getting ready for Christmas. And then there's some other articles in there. One of the things that I'm thinking that's happening or kind of evolving out of this is I'm spending time looking at nature and making metaphors back and saying, how would we apply that? For example, I just had an owl sighting recently, and I haven't seen an owl probably since 2017. And he and I sat there and stared at each other for a while. But the idea that, he had come out just as dusk and we were trying to get our walk in just before it got dark. And we were able to cross paths. And it was just enough light I could see him and not too much light that he could see me. And I thought, how often do I not look for the edges on where people have different abilities or people that have different timing, and how can I interact with them was kind of part of that. So some of the posts out there are writings like that.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
And I love a good owl. I got to say, when I see one, it's very rare, but when I do, it's pretty amazing. I actually saw one last week.
Nice.
Just flying. I was up in Washington visiting my parents for the first time since COVID, and they live in the nature. So there came one. It was pretty amazing.
Well, and I'm in downtown. Now, granted, it's Raleigh. It's not Manhattan, but this is downtown. And here's a barred owl. I mean, he was 2 feet tall.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that.
It was.
It's kind of cool how sometimes nature too will come to us. Like when I because I lived in Manhattan for a long time. And 2 times I've had a butterfly land on my shoulder while I lived in Manhattan.
That is cool.
I mean, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
It was pretty neat. I'm like, okay, what's the significance? Because it's got to mean something. I don't know what that is, but it was pretty cool.
That is very cool. Definitely.
Yeah. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I'm just curious, is there anything that you would love to share with the audience before we wrap up?
So I think the big thing is busyness is a choice.
Yes.
And it may take a lot to get out of it. Yeah. But you are so worth it to be a human being and not a human doing.
Oh, I love that. And one more time, if you could pop your book up there for everybody to see, I want to make sure.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. And is there anything else that you want to mention about your book that maybe, people can expect to find inside?
Well, a lot of it, there are stories. There are personal stories, and then there are first account interviews. And I personally love them. I would love to hear what other people think and what resonates with them, because I will be, working on the workbooks. So that's part of what I'm doing is trying to understand what is resonating with people, what is helping them, what is not resonating. And that's perfectly fine as well. So it's a work in progress.
And so the best way to reach out to you and give feedback, would that be through your website?
It could be the website or through the social media. That's perfectly fine too. Yeah.
All right. I
It's
love
great.
that. And I love that you're open and willing for that, because a lot of people are like, no, it's like, I don't want to hear anything negative. And it's
Well,
not even negative,
yeah,
it's
I can't
just
edit the book, but whatever the next thing is, we can talk about that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I love too that there's stories, because it's relatable. And like you said, you're an example.
Not the
you know?
example. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love that, I always appreciate it when a guest will say something to the effect of, this is how I've done it.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily exactly how you need to do it, but this is how I've done it.
And this is where I think part of that area of what I'm searching for is I'm not sure other people are as comfortable with a blank sheet of paper as I am.
Yeah.
So that's part of what I'm trying to understand is I know people like to edit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would that first thing be that people would like to edit? So it's almost like, let me give you the prototype and then you go through the iterations to create the prototype, but I'm not sure what that prototype should be.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Well, Jennifer, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you here. And I can hardly wait to see what you come up with next.
Well, thank you. And it was fabulous to be here. This has been a load of fun.
Awesome. Well, have a great night, and hopefully we'll be able to chat soon.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I did not want that to end. That was absolutely fabulous. I can hardly wait to see, as I mentioned, to see what she comes up with next. Yay. This is somebody that is meant for the universe. And I just love that she is sharing her gifts in every way. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. And we will be back on Monday. So enjoy your weekend, everyone.